cold breath of dawn crept across the flagstones of a noble hall, curling into the hem of heavy cloaks and under the brittle soles of waiting slippers. The stone floor, polished by centuries of boot leather and bare feet, now bore the hush of tension, a silence thick enough to taste. Along one wall, girls stood in a row, veiled and still, their hands clasped in front of them like penitents before the altar. Linen scratched against their wrists. Embroidery itched like chains. They had been told to stand straight, to avoid eye contact, to let the cloth speak of their value, and the silence confirm it. Outside, roosters cried, indifferent to the rituals unfolding behind shuttered windows. Within the hall, firelight stuttered beneath a blackened hearth, barely touching the high-beamed ceiling. A girl, 13 at most, shifted slightly under her veil, though the movement earned her a soft but pointed hiss from the chaperone behind her. She bowed her head again, heart thudding beneath the layers of wool and brocade. Her body was too warm, her feet too cold, the imbalance of every girl forced into the stillness of expectation. Her name would be offered soon, but not her voice. Never her voice. Her father stood a few paces ahead. The family signet ring clenched in a hand that had once held her as a newborn, singing lullabies in forgotten dialects. Oh. Now that same hand gestured, negotiated, priced. Not love, not legacy, but alliance. Across from him stood the suitor, wide-shouldered, gray-bearded, draped in fur. His silence spoke of acquisition, not affection. His eyes wandered not to her face, but to her dowry chart, her height, her obedience. Their glances met for a moment, his flat with expectation, hers flickering with something between panic and prayer. She had imagined marriage once, as a soft word in fairy stories, cloaked in roses and music. But those stories had fled her mind when the bleeding started last winter, and with it, the teachings. A woman's worth lies in her submission. Her purity is her currency. Her silence is her safety. The nuns who whispered this had once been girls like her. They spoke with the hollow resignation of those who had survived, not thrived. Now she stood like they once did, veiled and voiceless, her body no longer her own, but a bridge between houses, lands, and legacies. A tray passed with mulled wine and small honeyed cakes, ceremonial sweetness to mask the bitter truths.
Ow.
The bride was not to eat.
Ow.
It might stain her veil, mar the presentation. Instead, she kept her eyes on the coals, trying not to imagine the bridal bed being prepared somewhere upstairs, with its carved saints watching and linens scented in rosemary to hide the sweat and blood to come. Somewhere a servant girl lit candles, somewhere the priest rehearsed the Latin. Somewhere her name was being inscribed in ink. Beside a man's name she would never be allowed to refuse. She remembered a bird from her childhood, a falcon tethered outside the falconer's hut, its wings strong but tied. She had reached for it once, and it had screamed, not in threat, but in hunger. She understood that cry now. The rope did not kill it, but it made flight a memory. A voice broke the hush. Her father, she is ready. The man nodded. A pouch of coin passed discreetly, her life reduced to metal pressed by strange hands. The girl stepped forward when told. Not too quickly, that would seem eager. Not too slowly, that would seem willful. She had been taught how to move like an offering. She bowed slightly, and he placed a ring at the edge of her palm. It was warm. It did not belong to her. The hall exhaled. The deal was done. No feast was planned. Only a supper of roasted fowl and apples to sweeten the bitter edges of a legal transaction. She would be sent to his manor within the week. The bridal veil would not be lifted until the priest's blessing was given. Till then, she would remain cloaked, half seen, like a relic behind glass. Present, but not touched. That night she sat beside her mother in silence, the fire casting shadows on their faces. Her mother did not weep. Weeping was forbidden. But she held her daughter's hand with a trembling that betrayed memory, not of joy, but of the same path once walked. "I'm sorry," the girl whispered, not knowing why or to whom. Perhaps to herself. Perhaps to all the girls who had stood here before. Outside, the bell tower groaned once. Not a chime, but a warning. And in the stillness that followed, she closed her eyes. She would not scream. She would not run, but she would remember. Somewhere beyond these walls, a bird stirred in its cage. The frost had crept in before the sun. It glazed the stone floor of the chapel in a pale sheen, as if even the earth itself had recoiled from what it was asked to witness. Its breath hung in the air like smoke, fragile and vanishing. The scent of old incense clung to the wooden beams above, mingling with the beeswax of the guttering candles, their flames shivering in rhythm with the girl's hands. She stood at the altar, swallowed in velvet, too heavy for her frame, sleeves trailing like broken wings, wrists trembling beneath cuffs stitched by hands that would never touch her again. Latin words echoed off the damp walls. Sacred syllables she did not speak, could not interpret. But she had been taught to bow at the right moments, to lower her gaze, to press her lips closed. Her name was uttered only once, followed swiftly by a man's. She knew him as one knows a ghost, distant, looming, impossible to refuse. Her dowry had been measured in goats, in bolts of wool, in the silver her mother had hidden away for years, all now laid bare on a table like sacrificial offerings. A priest's pen scratched her name into the marriage register. Beside numbers and symbols more binding than any oath she could understand, the ink bled on the page. She did not. Outside, horses shifted, hooves thick with mud, impatient breath steaming from their nostrils. They were fed, brushed, made ready. She was not. She had not eaten since dawn. Her stomach was hollow, not with hunger, but with dread. Her ears strained past the chants, past the hollow voice of the priest, to find her mother's breath. She found it behind her, hidden behind a linen wimple, shallow, trembling, like a song unsung. Her mother's hands, once so quick with thread and comfort, now remained clenched in prayer, too far to hold her daughter's fingers one last time. Her face was unreadable, but her silence was thunder. The ring slid onto her finger with a metallic finality. It was too large. It slid to the base of her hand like a weight, cold against her skin. She would not be permitted to remove it. As the priest lifted his arms in blessing, the bells began to ring. Their sound crashed through the air, reverberating against every wall, but no joy clung to them. This was not a wedding. It was a verdict. The chapel doors opened with a groan, and a gust of wind swept through, lifting her veil as if the spirits themselves had drawn breath. Snowflakes rode the draught, falling like ash upon the stone. She stepped forward, her shoes slipping slightly on the frost, steadied not by her husband, but by no one. Behind her, the doors began to close. A final glimpse of home flickered in the doorway, the tapestry her mother had woven when she was born. A cradle embroidered in gold thread. A dove, a name stitched beneath. She would never see it again. The carriage smelled of damp straw and iron. She sat beside the man who now owned her name, her body, her silence. He did not speak. She did not dare. The road ahead was long, winding past frozen fields, past shepherds who would not meet her eye, past chapels that held no sanctuary. Every turn of the wheel dragged her farther from the hearth, where she had once whispered secrets to the fire, the place where her sister had braided her hair, where her mother had sung to the Virgin in the quiet hours of night. She did not weep. The tears had already been taken from her, used up by the women before her, drained by the years of knowing this day would come. As dusk fell, and the carriage wheels found rhythm over stones, she looked down at her hands. The ring gleamed dull and wrong beneath the veil. She clenched her fists, then slowly opened them, palms bare, fingers empty, save for that one band of metal. She whispered to no one, Domini, libera me, Lord deliver me. The carriage did not stop. But somewhere in the distance, a bird called once, thin and alone, then fell silent again. A spindle rolled across the cold stone floor, tracing a slow, spiraling path into shadow. No one noticed it fall. No one stooped to lift it. It had been dropped by a maid in haste, her hand shaking, her apron stained with oils and salt, as the upper chamber filled with the scent of lavender and something sharper, almost bitter, vinegar and ash. The girl sat on a low stool, stripped to the waist, her arms braced at her sides. Her skin was scrubbed with a linen cloth so coarse it left behind faint welts, invisible under candlelight but burning with each stroke. Clean for the holy night, they told her. The body must be made ready for what it was created to give. She did not reply. She had not spoken all day. The bath water had long since cooled. Steam no longer rose from the brass basin. Her chemise lay folded at the edge of the bed, white and stiff, waiting like a witness. The bruises on her ribs, dark violets blooming from last week's disobedience, would be hidden beneath its fabric, but she would feel them still, when she knelt, when she lay down, when she was touched. Below, the great hall thundered with voices and laughter, the feast in full flame. Pigeons glazed in honey, trenchers of soft bread, goblets of wine dyed deep as blood. Her husband, crowned in garlands of holly and gold thread, sat at the head table, not watching her absence, not noticing her silence. There was no place set for her. Her duty was not to eat. Her duty would begin after the final course, when the songs fell quiet and the chamber doors were closed. A priest moved through the manor, robes sweeping the rushes. He would come soon with a bowl of blessed water and a sprig of rosemary to purify the marriage bed and sprinkle the sheets. He would anoint the pillows and murmur Latin over the mattress, over the threshold, over the girl herself. Benedicta, sit in utero tu. Blessed be thy womb. A blessing that felt more like a sentence. She wrapped her arms around her knees and breathed into the wool of her nightrobe, trying to find warmth, trying not to hear the footsteps drawing closer from the corridor. They were not his yet, just servants, priests, the scraping hush of obligation, but they would come. They always did. Every girl who had sat in this chamber before her had felt it. The cold at her back, the knot in her gut, the silence that pressed against the ribs and settled deep. They told her this was honor, that it was a woman's glory to be chosen, to serve, to kneel before a man and offer blood, womb, name. But she could feel no glory in the way her hands trembled, in the way her voice had disappeared weeks ago, folded into obedience. Her thoughts no longer wandered, no longer dreamed. They waited, still and dark, like the basin's water. Once, when she was 7, she had stolen a goose feather from the market and run barefoot through the fields, laughing until her sides hurt. That laugh had not returned. It had been taken like so many other things, her spindle, her voice, her body, her choice. She did not remember the sound of her own joy, only the echo of lessons. Duty is sacred. Silence is strength. Obedience is love. A door creaked open. Candlelight stretched into the room. She rose slowly, one movement at a time, as if her limbs had forgotten how to be hers. The priest entered with a solemn nod, murmuring under his breath, tracing crosses in the air. Behind him, another servant lit a fresh taper and placed it by the bedside, where the sheets lay turned back, crisp and cold. She stood, eyes unfocused, as the holy water sprinkled her shoulders. Drops slid down her spine, cool as the stone beneath her. The priest's fingers brushed her forehead, and for a moment she imagined screaming, not from rage, but from somewhere deeper, older, primal, but no sound came, only breath, only the ache of being seen, yet never known. The door closed behind them. She was alone. Somewhere below, the feast still roared, drunk with celebration. The bells would ring soon to announce the consummation. Proof of honor, proof of obedience, proof that the girl had disappeared, and the woman, the wife, had taken her place. She walked to the bed, sat on its edge, and pulled the chemise over her bruised skin. The candle flickered beside her, casting her shadow high on the wall. A tall, silent silhouette, question unasked. She waited. And outside, in the courtyard, the wind shifted, scattering ash from the torches. A single feather drifted across the threshold. White, weightless, forgotten. The market square stank of slaughter, of blood caked into cobblestones, of hides drying in the sun, of yesterday's fish rotting in wicker baskets. Flies danced on every surface. Chickens screamed. Somewhere a pig squealed under a blade. But amid the noise and filth, something quieter unfolded. A girl stood barefoot beside a wooden cart, her father's hand firm on her shoulder. Her dress was too clean for the mud around her. Washed in lye, stiff with starch, cinched tight at the waist to make her look older than her years. In her hair, a circlet of dried rosemary. Not for beauty, not for scent. It was the sign. She was for sale. She kept her eyes on her feet, where bruises bloomed beneath the dust. She had been warned not to speak unless spoken to. Not to fidget. Not to cry. Her smile, when summoned, was soft and practiced. The same way she smiled at priests. At aunts who called her pretty, at the steward who once slapped her for spilling soup. Her mouth did not belong to her, neither did her body. Today would confirm that. Men approached. They lifted her chin, measured her height with their eyes. One asked if she could milk goats. Another pressed her fingers to check their strength. One leaned in to smell her breath. The stench of wine clung to his beard. She didn't move. She had been trained to stay still like a lamb before the butcher. A laugh erupted behind her, then a cough. Coins clinked in someone's pouch. The bartering began. Her father's voice was calm, negotiating not her future, but her price. A silver brooch changed hands, delicate, shaped like a lark with its wings folded. Her father pocketed it with a nod. And just like that, she was spoken for. No parchment. No church. No one asked her name. The girl became a promise sealed in metal. The man who now claimed her was not cruel in appearance, neither old nor monstrous. But his eyes were dull, his fingers thick with rings, one of them stained with dried wax. A tradesman? A widower, perhaps? She would learn his name later. Perhaps she would learn to love it. More likely she would learn to speak it with deference and nothing more. He nodded once at her and turned away, confident she would follow. She did not move. The bell tower struck noon. Its echo rippled through the square like a final breath before silence. She felt the sound in her chest, heavy, hollow, inevitable. A woman behind a stall blessed herself. Another girl, younger still, watched from behind a barrel, a handful of nettles clutched in her fist. The girl felt the air shift, her breath caught. Not from joy, but from the terrible, aching certainty that no one, not one person in this crowded square of bargaining and bread, would ask her if she wanted this. No one would say her name. No one would ask what she dreamed of. Her father gave her a gentle nudge. She stepped forward. Mud swallowed her shoes. Her rosemary circlet fell to the ground. No one noticed. And as she followed the man into the crowd, a single crow screamed overhead, its wings slicing the pale sky like a wound. Rain clawed at the manor like 1,000 unseen hands, fingernails of wind-scraping wood, pressing against the shutters as if begging to be let inside. Beyond the stone walls, the world drowned slowly in gray, sodden fields blackened with rot. Livestock huddled beneath trembling trees, and distant church bells muffled by fog. Inside, the air was still, dense with the scent of wet wool, tallow smoke, and something fainter, like lavender crushed long ago and forgotten beneath a chest of linens. In the solar, the girl sat upon a low stool, her feet barely brushing the rushes. She held the doll close, limp in her arms, its cloth body soft with age, its eyes little more than thread-worn thin by fingers that once believed in forever. Her sister's stitching had begun to unravel at the neck. She had once named it Dove, but now she couldn't remember why. Names had become heavy things. Promises tied in knots she could not untie. Her mother entered without sound, gliding like breath through the door, a veil in one hand, a folded parchment in the other. She knelt without speaking and reached for the girl's hair. Fingers combed through it with practiced reverence, smoothing each strand like preparing an offering for the altar. The veil was pale, ivory with thin lace edges, once worn by her grandmother, once prayed over during childbirth, once stained with the tears of another girl given to another man. Tonight it would become hers. The girl did not look at her mother. She stared instead at the flickering fire, its flames rising and falling like uncertain hands. A log cracked. Somewhere above, rain leaked through the thatch with the rhythm of a heartbeat. The parchment was placed beside her doll. She knew its contents. She had been promised at 5 summers. She was now 12. Her name inked beside a crest she had never seen, beside a man she had never touched. She would not cry. The tears had dried days ago when the steward had dusted the guest chambers, when the cook had set aside honey for the wedding bread, when her sister, now cloistered and voiceless in a convent 2 valleys away, had sent no reply to her letter. Girls did not run. Girls were not lost, only given, taken, or locked away. This was not theft. This was tradition. Outside hooves approached, slow, certain, wrapped in the weight of dowry and duty. The Lord had come not for love, but for settlement. He sought her womb, her silence, her lineage. A girl in exchange for peace between 2 lands, Her body would be the parchment. Her blood would seal the vow. The servant knocked once, then withdrew. The veil was lifted. Her mother's lips moved. A prayer, perhaps. Or maybe just a goodbye that could not be spoken aloud. She stood. No protests, no screams. Her rebellion was colder than that, a kind of vanishing, a hollowing out so complete that even the fire no longer reflected in her eyes. She walked from the room, but left Dove behind. The doll lay there, neck undone, staring upward through threadless eyes. Rain seeped through the shutters. And somewhere deep within the manor, a door creaked open, then closed. Another girl had disappeared, and the silence began again.